Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Noble, and as a member of the organizing committee, I am so pleased to welcome you to the 2021 Jewish Book Festival. This is our festival's 23rd year. The members of our committee, our leader Kim Benaji, and our Jewish Federation are thrilled that we continue to bring quality programs like this to our widespread community and to see all of you here today. Today's program would not be possible without the continued support of the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, the Jewish Book Council in New York, and the generosity of our literary circle. Before I introduce you to today's author, please note that you will be able to ask questions after the presentation. Just go to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and type them in. And now it is my great honor and a pleasure to introduce today's author. Retired Admiral Ami Ayalon was born in 1945 in Kibbutz Ma'agan on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. He began his military career as a commando in Flotilla 13, the equivalent of the U.S. Navy SEALs, and received the Medal of Valor, Israel's highest military honor. He rose to commander of the Navy and then served as director of the Shin Bet, Israel's internal security agency, where he modernized operations in the wake of Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. After his retirement in 2000, he launched the People's Voice Joint Peace Initiative with Dr. Sari Nusseibeh. He served as both a Knesset member and a cabinet minister, and he organized and was featured in the 2012 Oscar-nominated documentary, The Gatekeepers. He is a member of the Commanders for Israel's Security. He chairs the executive committee of the Haifa Research Center for Maritime and Strategy, and he serves as volunteer chairman of AKIM, which is Israel's National Association for Children and Adults with Intellectual Disabilities. He's speaking to us this evening in Israel, and so won't you please join me in welcoming Ami Ayalon. Hello, Ami. Can you
Hi.
hear me? Hi.
Yes, of
Um,
course.
Good. Um, I wanted to start by asking you about the concept for this book. The title almost sounds like a political op-ed. It's Friendly Fire, How Israel Became Its Own Worst Enemy and the Hope for Its Future. And in one of the first chapters, you say to Meir Shalev that you wanted to write a memoir, but not about yourself. But actually, this book is a blend of incidents from your own life, interspersed with more recent conversations you had with people specifically for this book. And both kinds of pieces are really vivid storytelling. So what did you have in mind for this memoir, and why did you want to write it in English first?
Well, to your first question, I had nothing in mind when I started. And the first quote came from Amos Oz' book. And I understood it only later that the only journey that you don't come back empty handed is a journey inside yourself. And I realized it only when the book was finished. I wrote it with a friend of mine, and because I'm not a writer. And when I told Meir Shalev, who is a very good friend, that the idea is to tell my story, but I'm not the topic, I think that this is exactly what I had in mind.
Mm.
Yeah, it is my story. It is the way I see myself, the people whom I meet, and the history of the state of Israel. But I'm not the topic. The event that I've been through and the people whom I met and the places that I lived. In a way, this is a story. Probably it's too arrogant to say, but this is a story of the state of Israel, the way I understand the history, at least since the beginning of Zionism, the end of the 19th century. So again, the idea was not to write about myself, about my adventures, but to write on the past, the present, on the future of the Israeli society and the state of Israel, the way I understand it.
All right. Why did you want to publish in English first? That seems an unusual choice.
That's okay. It's sensitive, and I understand that you will hear me saying the same, or repeating the same idea. In Israel, it will not be a very, very acceptable or popular book. Even the title will be probably will decide not to read it because of the meaning of the title. What do you mean by saying Israel became the own? We have Iran, we have Hezbollah, we have Palestinians, etc. Are we the major threat? And yes, I do believe that we became the worst enemy um, of our future. In a way, it is because I believe that we can shape or we can influence on our future, and when we don't do it, so we have to not to blame ourselves, but to look for responsibility, and we are responsible if we shall face a dead end, if we shall see the end of Zionism. It is not because of Iran and not because of Palestinian terror and not because of Hezbollah, Hamas, or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It is because we are not doing what we should. So I'm not blaming, but since I believe that we can shape our future, so I don't speak in language of blame. I don't blame anybody, but I'm looking for who is responsible. And in my case, I'm responsible. We are responsible. And in Israel, this is not, the spoken language. We speak, most Israelis, we speak in language of blame. We blame our prime minister, we blame our cabinet minister, we blame Palestinians, we blame the world, so and in a way, it is too easy when you blame everybody, so you don't look on yourself. And in a way, what I'm saying in this book, probably I decided that the debate or the public debate should start abroad. In this case, among Jewish communities in America and England. I'm saying Jewish communities because I believe that in most Jewish communities, they care about Israel. Even if they don't understand and even if they don't agree to all what we do, they do care about Israel. And it is very, very important for us to hear what they think, what you think. Not be, especially be what you think, because we know that you don't hate us. We can't blame you that you are anti-Semitic. And so we have to listen. And I think that we do not listen enough. So I wanted the book to be published in America first, and only then. Finally, I found myself. It is translated to Germany, and it is published in Czechoslovakia, and in Arabic. I hope that it will be published in Hebrew. I'm just finishing the translation, and if everything will go okay, so smoothly, in our future next day, in the Independence Day, it will be published.
So very good. Um, so I want to ask you about this specifically. You said if Israel is its own worst enemy, what exactly are you talking about with its own worst enemy um, at this point?
Well, in order to really understand
Sorry,
it,
that's a really broad
no,
question.
it's okay. No, it's a great question, but I have to say that in order really to understand it, you have to read the book. So in your case, you read the book,
Yeah.
so I know that you know. In a way, I repeat myself. If we are responsible to our future, and second, if the way I understand the road that we choose, um, the way that we or our policy today will bring us to the end of Zionism. And when I said the end of Zionism, meaning to see Israel as a safe Jewish democracy. If we shall not change our policy, if we shall go on building more settlements and occupying the territory today, by the way, even the term occupation is almost illegitimate in Israel. This is the way I understand Zionism, the end of Zionism, because if our border will be on the Jordan, because this state, the land of Israel, belongs to us, it was given to us by God. So we are not majority in our state, and if we are not majority, we do not have the power, and we do not have the right to dictate the calendar, the language, the way we celebrate our holidays, or the story, the narrative that we tell our children. What happened here during the last 5,000 years, 3,000 years, 100 years, or even the last 30 years? We are not majority. So we shall lose our identity as the state of the Jewish people. It will not be a democracy because we have the power. So it will not be a democracy. We shall lose our Jewish identity, and it will be, and we are losing our security. Palestinians will not raise a white flag. We saw it, we see it every time. In the war that we are fighting today, no one raise a white flag. There is no surrender. And in defensive shield, 3-4 years ago, we killed more than 2,200 Palestinians. More than 50% of them, by the way, civilians, many children. They did not raise a white flag. They did not surrender. This is exactly what I'm writing and studying and teaching now, the interface between democracy and terror. So it will not be safe, it will not be Jewish, and it will not be democracy. But I believe that it is in our hand. This is what I mean when I say that we became the worst enemy of ourselves.
Okay, well, so then let's dive in a little bit and get into some of what you have in the book. So after a long career in the Navy and then the Shin Bet in defense and security, you've spent the last 20 years as an activist advocating for a two-state solution with the Palestinian people. Um, how did you get to that point, and what shifted in your mind?
Well, in retrospect, it was a process. I remind myself and to the people who did not read yet the book, hopefully they will, but anyhow, I was born to what I call today the mainstream Zionism. The Zionism concept of my parents was, in simple words, we are going to build a future state for the Jewish people, because the Jewish people is facing a great danger. It was during the 30s. They came to Israel during the end of the 30s. My mother, the child, to study in Jerusalem, and my father as an illegal immigrant, penetrating against the British mandate. So, and the concept was we are going to build this state, this future state, in the land of Israel that was given to us. It is ours. Everywhere where we can build a settlement, work the land, and defend ourselves. So the concept was settlements and security. This was the concept of my parents. This was the concept that brought me to the Navy SEALs, the Israeli Shayetet 13, because security. My friend, by the way, in 67, nothing was changed. I have to remind myself that until 67, our eastern, it was not border, it was ceasefire line. So my friends from my kibbutz, they went to build settlements in the Jordan Valley or the Golan Heights and in Sinai. It was a labor movement. It was not the invention of radical or fundamentalist religious people. So it took me about 20 years to understand what Meir Shalev told me when I met him, what Amos Oz told us openly from the first moment, and what Professor Yashar Leibovich told us. The occupation will destroy us as human beings and will destroy our Jewish democracy. In my case, it took me about 20 years to understand. Only during the first Intifada, I understood that, yes, we liberated places. But in the places that we liberated, that are ours, Me'arat HaMachpelah in Hebron, Shechem, they call it Nablus, the old city of Jerusalem. In these places, millions of Palestinians are living, and they see us as occupier. They don't see us as liberator. And this was the moment that I started to understand that the Zionist concept of my parents that enabled us to create this great place, great society, will bring us to a dead end. So we are facing a dilemma. We have to choose whether to give up pieces or 27% of the land of Israel to somebody else, not because we owe him, because we have to make sure that our safety, defense, and our identity will be secured. And then, of course, in the Shabak, I met Palestinians. And it was the first time when I understood that they are not military targets. I don't know, it's something very, very difficult to say, but until then, during more than 30 years as a naval officer, we saw them as enemy. And when you send us to fight, you send us to the battlefield, you do not expect us to negotiate. You send us to kill the enemy. So this is what we did. This is what I did for more than 30 years. And I tell these events and stories not because I'm proud of it. I'm not proud of it. But it gives me the legitimacy to tell my friends and to everybody the reality is the way I see it. And I came to believe that not only we have to divide this land, I came to believe that I know how we can do it. It is very difficult. We are facing a challenge, which is almost the challenge that our parents faced when they created the Zionism, or the concept, the movement, and the revolution that became the Zionist revolution. But it is in our hands.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the kibbutz movement and your father's history and how you discovered some of that, part of that faces onto your own career and choices. How much did you know ahead?
Well, my parents came from Europe during the late 30s, as I mentioned before. My father was my mother was a child when she came. I think she was 15 years old, and she was sent because her parents came to believe that they will have no future, and they are not young enough in order to start again, to live in a different place. But they sent her and her brother, my uncle, to make sure that she will not be alone. And my father came as an illegal immigrant, by the way. They believed in a socialist kind of, I know that in America it is not very popular, but a social, the Zionism movement that created this state, the way I understand it, again, it's a very, very subjective point of view, was a non-religious and a socialist kind of concept. So, for example, just one example, they did not believe in private property. And they believe that they have to create a new society, a new man and woman, and in order to create this new society and new state. And my father, when he left his parents, he couldn't bring anything with him, so his mother gave him the ring, took it from her finger. Now, this ring was with her 3 generations, with her family. And she told him, while she was crying, um, keep this ring just to make sure that you will remember me every day. Now, okay, he took it and he came, and after about, I don't know, a year or two, they did not have enough money in the kibbutz, and he decided that in order to help to the members of the kibbutz, so he took the ring and he gave it to the person who was responsible on the finance aspects of the kibbutz. And since then he did not see this ring. You know, this ring was sold because so and he used to think that he did something great because you know the concept of private property. They believed in the future. They forgot. They erased their past. They my father, when he was 13 years old, he came to his father and he said, who was very, very religious, by the way. And he said, from now on, I'm not Jewish anymore. I'm Hebrew. And Hebrew speak Hebrews. Ivrim medabrim Ivrit, because Jews speak Yiddish and they spoke Hebrew. I'm saying it because it was a revolution. They erased 2,000 years of history, the Mishnah, the Talmud, 2,000 years of Jewish wisdom. And they, in a way, they went back to the kingdom of Israel. Their heroes were heroes that were erased from the Jewish history. Bar Kokhba is not mentioned in the Mishnah and in the Talmud. All the families, about, I don't know, 700 people who commit suicide in Metzada, they were traitors. It was against the Jewish religion to commit suicide. They did it in order not to be slaves. And they were erased. They were not mentioned for 2,000 years. Those were their heroes. So this was, you know, the atmosphere of my childhood. Syrians were up above on the mountain, and we understood we have to fight because we have to create a state for the Jewish people.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it's fairly incredible. And your father was actually sent abroad a couple of times,
Right.
even though he didn't talk too much about the Shoah. He tried to redress
Right.
it a number of times, and you told some interesting stories about that as well.
Right.
Um, I wanted to ask you, you came to the Shin Bet directorship after becoming commander of the Navy and securing a submarine for Israel. You came as an outsider right after Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, and Arafat came to the Palestinian territories after Oslo. What were the most important things you changed during your time as the director of the Shin Bet?
Well, I think that first of all we changed everything because the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin was probably a, a major failure of the Shin Bet and later wave of Palestinian terror. But once you ask me what I believe what was the most important in retrospect, I think that what we did with what we call the code of ethics was the most important change that we introduced to the Shin Bet during my term. Um, it was a very, very simple document. But what is most important, it was the document that the first sentence create the hierarchy of our identities. Who are we? So when we say, first of all, we are human beings, and only later we are Jews, Israeli citizens, and we are serving in the public service of Israel, etc. Why it is so important? Because you have to understand, when I joined the Shin Bet, the belief among Israelis, by the way, not only among the people who used to serve in the Shin Bet, um, it was acceptable by our cabinet ministers, by you could hear it in the public debate, that security is more important than than the law. Meaning, in order to make sure that our people will not die because we are fighting terror, um, we can do everything, even even if it is against the law of the state. So, for example, anyhow, so without going into details, because I'm doing it in my book, um, it was a major transition, change in the culture of the organization. And the idea that if we are human beings, so first of all, there is some concepts that a human being, the idea of good and bad, what is allowed and what is not allowed to do. For example, the idea that you will never kill a person who is unarmed and does not present an immediate danger. It's very simple. Everybody understands it. In the Shabbat, in the Shin Bet, it was not it was not an acceptable idea. If he's a prisoner and he doesn't have any information, so we can kill him. We did it several times during the 80s, during the first Intifada. So I think that the major shift or change was to introduce the code of ethics.
It's a pretty important change, and I think it comes before 9/11 and our own debates about waterboarding and other kinds of horrors.
Mhm.
Um, so it's an important point of view, I
By the
think.
way, I
Yeah,
mentioned in my book
yeah.
that we did not invent anything, and if we compare ourselves to what America did in Afghanistan and Iraq, or what Europeans did and in several places are still doing in Africa and some other places, we are saints. It's not a joke. We shall never dare to do what I know America did in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. But still, we don't have to blame ourselves, but we have to take responsibility. Because finally, in the war that we are fighting today, I'm not a philosopher, and my academic background does not allow me to teach other people, not philosophy and not moral, I don't know, values. But I know that in the war that we are fighting today, the concept of victory is related to us being human beings. We shall never be able to win or to achieve success in this war, the war against terror, if we shall not present the face that our enemy expect to see. Because finally, the only example is the Cold War. Professor Nye, when he came in America with the concept of soft power and later smart power, he started his book by saying that the Berlin Wall was not destroyed by American missiles. was destroyed by hammers of the enemy. And they did it because they came to believe in the culture, in the moral values of the enemies, democracy, human rights, etc., etc. And they try to achieve freedom. So again, it is a war of ideas, not less than war of airplanes, submarines, and weaponry.
Interesting. Now, when you were in the Shin Bet, you started working with Arafat's top security officers in a joint operation against Jewish terror as well as against Palestinian terror. Um, I did want to ask a little bit about some of the advice you gave to the prime ministers, because I think I counted about six prime ministers whom you advised when you were in the Shin Bet. Um, and some of their reactions run counter to what I would have expected, at least from their public personas and what I knew of them at all. Who surprised you the most?
Among the prime ministers,
Yeah, I mean, when you were
well,
advising them how to deal with.
it's not a joke. None of them. I was not surprised. Um, I was disappointed, but not surprised. I knew all of them years earlier because when I was a commander of the Navy, so I met all of them, and Netanyahu and Rabin and Shimon Peres and Ehud Barak. I knew them. I met them personally, so I was not surprised. I was disappointed. Among the leaders or people whom I met, Jibril Rajub, he was the commander of the Palestinian Security Organization in the West Bank, and before I knew him, he was a terrorist. He was in our jail because during the first Intifada, he used to believe that we understand only violence. So he was one of the Palestinian activists tried to kill Israeli citizens. So what surprised me was how deep, how much he knew us. When he was sitting in jail, he studied Hebrew and he translated uh, one of the most important books that was written by our Prime Minister Menachem Begin um, to Arabic, because he believed that we have to understand, Palestinians, they have to understand the way we created the state of Israel. And he chose Begin because Begin used to believe that the British will understand only power, only military violence. He did not translate books of leaders from the labor movement because they believed in negotiations, etc., etc. So, and he knew, our history more than I believe most Israelis today.
Yeah,
So this was a big surprise for me.
yeah. So interesting, but you became friends
Yes.
eventually. Yeah. Um, After you left the Shin Bet, Ehud Barak went to the Camp David Accords and they fell through. And shortly thereafter, you started to become a public activist for the two-state solution. Um, can you tell us a little bit about how you started the People's Voice Initiative with Sari Naseba?
Well, it was after the failure of the collapse of Camp David, and it was clear that we are not negotiating any with the Palestinians, and in a way, from the very beginning of the Second Intifada, it was clear that we are not fighting Palestinian terror anymore. We after the beginning of the Intifada, we started to fight the Palestinian people and not the Palestinian terror.
Mm.
And this was a major shift. By the way, people do not understand that what we are doing today, we are not fighting Palestinian terror. We are fighting Palestinian people. And I felt that we are, as I said before, we are heading nowhere. Because to win this kind of war, um, from my experience, um, there is no military solution. By the way, even during the first Intifada, our General Chief of Staff, Dan Shomron, said this is not a military phenomenon. This is a social human phenomena. It is a uprising, popular uprising, and all what the military can do is to reduce the level of flames. But finally, politicians will have to come up with some arrangement, some agreement. So I found myself in London, a story that I tell in my book, and I met Palestinians, and suddenly a friend of mine, a Palestinian psychiatrist, Professor or Dr. Iyad Sarraj, came to me and said, "Okay, finally we are winning." It was crazy, We are killing. They are losing hundreds of Palestinians, and I told him, "No, you are crazy. You are losing your people. You are counting your bodies, and you are going to lose your dream of Palestinian state alongside Israel." He said, "Ami, you don't understand us. Victory for us is to see you suffer. This is all what we want. Because until now, we have been suffering. From now on, you will suffer as long as we shall suffer." And he said, "We even achieved the balance of power. You F-16 versus suicide bomber." So I understood that, okay, this violence on both sides will bring us even to lose the concept of victory. And I tried to find, I wrote some concepts that was well known during the negotiation time, and I asked who can live with these parameters as the future parameters of some arrangement, some peace agreement. And Sarino Seba was the only one who said, "Okay, it's sound reasonable. Let's talk." So when we came back, okay, we met, and this is the beginning of something that, of course, we did not bring peace to our region. We Some people will say that we did not influence. Probably they are right, but I still believe that if ever we shall achieve peace, it will be more or less along the parameters that we did not invent. By the way, we just summarized all what was agreed upon during years of negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis during Oslo.
Yeah.
Our greatest achievement was we did it on one page,
Yeah.
6 parameters.
But you got
That's
a
it.
big petition with both
Yes,
Israelis
more
and
more
Palestinians,
than, more than 475,000
which is
people,
huge.
Palestinians and Israelis, signed on our petitions. That was one page. And well, I think that I believe that in a way it influenced on the idea of building the security or the barrier, defense barrier or wall between um, Israel and Palestine. But although it is not, some people will say that it is bad, but at least it gives a sense of two different realities, two states. And later, the pull out of Gaza. I know that
So,
Sharon were influenced not only by us, but yes, we were there when he told his people that after this security people telling us that we are heading nowhere. So we are losing the backbone of the Israeli society. So we were there. I don't know. It will take many years, but I believe that finally, again, it is in our hands.
So, I did want to start taking some questions, and I have a few more of my own, but I want to read the ones that I've got here.
Mhm.
Let's see. Sandra asks, what can we Jews around the world do to help Palestinians? And I assume also Israelis.
Tell us what you think. It's usually when I meet even friends in Jewish communities in America. By the way, in France, in America, in Australia, everywhere, they tell me, well, we do not have the right to tell you what to do. We are not living there. We are not serving in the IDF, etc., etc. Let me tell you first of all that less than 50% of the Israelis are serving in the IDF. Many of them are, ministers and parliament members, and they feel that they have the right um, to tell us exactly where to go. Second, not less important, Israel is or Zionism is a very, very peculiar concept. Israel is the only state which belong to people who are not its citizens. This is a state of the Jewish people. Every Jew who wants to come to visit or to be a citizen, we cannot deny it. This is the reason why this state was created. And this is a huge paradox. You have to understand, even those of you who deny it because it's too painful to admit, part, probably even a minor part of anti-Semitism today is anti-Israeli feelings. Is because what we are doing in Israel, not by trying to defend ourselves. Our war of today is in order to expand our eastern border, to build more settlements, and to deny the concept of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. And it is not acceptable by the international law. It is not acceptable by the international community. So by the way, it is very, very painful what I'm saying now. During the 90s, Ami building in Buenos Aires was destroyed as an act of terror led from Iran. Between 70 to 80 people died, most of them Jews. It was the reaction to what we did in Lebanon when we killed a leader of what we used to believe a terror organization in Lebanon. And the reaction was in Gaza. So dozens of Jews died in Buenos Aires. Many of them were not Zionists. Is the building of the Jewish community as a response. So when we say the people of Israel, they are responsible for each other, it doesn't mean that we love each other. It means that we are together whether we like it or not. Now you have to understand, for you it is easier to understand it because for us we are too close to the events. We feel the pain. We know the people who are killed in terror events. We know them from schools, from the military, from the university. So in Israel, a mother who sent her child to serve in the IDF, it's almost impossible for her to see this war the way you see it. So I believe that, I don't know, it is a duty You have to tell us what you see, and we have to listen.
We have a couple of more questions. One of the interesting ones, and one that I was tempted to ask too, was you've said that the early settlements in Gaza and the West Bank included members of kibbutzim. Could you please
Yes.
delineate some differences between them and present-day settlers? And I wanted to add that you had interviewed a couple of different settlers in the book, and the conversations are fascinating. What did you want, and why do you express some sympathy for the settlers?
Well, as I mentioned before, settlement concept started with the labor movement, and my friends, it's they are still living in the Jordan Valley. Third generation, their grandchildren are still living there. They are farmers. Many of them are living on the Golan Heights, which is totally different. But the first settlers were from the Labour Party, and later, the Pinchas Wallerstein, who was the leader of Gush Emunim, which is a religious movement that came later during the late 70s. He's a very good friend of mine. He was wounded as a soldier during the Six-Day War, defending my kibbutz. I was somewhere in the south, in Sharm el-Sheikh, fighting against, the Egyptians, and he was fighting, trying to conquer the Golan Heights from south, defending my kibbutz. Probably my father was one of the people, because he was wounded and was sent to the hospital. Probably my father was among the people who brought him to the hospital. So they used to believe that they are the followers of our parents. They followed, in a way, they understood the concept. The only way to create the state of Israel is by building settlements, working the land, and defending it. So in a way, they see themselves. And I really feel very close to him, although I think that I later saw something that he do not see, because I think that for him as a religious person, it is much more difficult to accept the idea that we have to divide this land and to prioritize between the land of Israel, the state of Israel. For him, it's the same, especially after 6 days, after the beginning. The Messiah is coming, probably tomorrow after 67. So many of them started to believe. So I wanted to show by meeting Pinchas Wallerstein, and on the other end of this rainbow is Rabbi Itzik Shapiro, who is, for me, living on a different planet. He believes that we have the right to kill every Palestinian child who still drink or the milk of his mother, because it is obvious that, when in 20 years he will be a terrorist. So something that I don't know. I was surprised to hear him, because he wrote it in his book, but to defend it and to see this is the most humanistic action in order to defend the people of Israel, because we are superior, and etc. etc. So settlers are not the same. It's a variety between every community and every movement, and I wanted to show to the reader the variety of the Israeli society, and in this case, the settler community.
Um, let's see. Louis Rubenstein asks, do the Palestinians want a two-state or a one-state solution? And I want to add to that, you've mentioned in your book a number of times the importance of testing out what's going out on the street, doing polling and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about that? Does that make sense?
The second question, I'm not sure I
Uh,
understood. Sorry.
well, you you had used Palestinian polling, your friend
Ah,
Dr.
okay.
Shikaki, and things like that.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what do they
Well,
want? Do we
again, no,
know?
no. It's in
Yeah.
a way, it's in the same question because when somebody asks, what do Palestinians really want? Uh, it's um, it's very difficult to give an answer. But polls are more or less what we have. So I can tell you that during the 90s, between 70 to 80% of the Palestinians wanted a future of two states because they used to believe that this is the only way to end the occupation and to achieve freedom. And they see themselves as a nation. We don't see them as a nation. We call them Arabs, but they see themselves as a nation, and they in a way, they believe that they deserve the self-determination, and they deserve a state of their own in which they will speak their own language, tell their own narrative, culture, etc., etc., etc. But there is a very strange correlation between the level of support in two states, which today is very, very low, and the belief among the people that it is achievable. If people do not believe that it is achievable, um, they will support it much less. And in a way, this is what we see today. The support in the concept of two states is relatively low. I think that among the Palestinians, it's between 40-45% will support it, and among Israelis, 45-49%, which is much lower because, again, during the 90s, it was between 70 to 80%. But if, and we did this survey a year ago, if you give Palestinians and Israelis, by the way, two options, what do you can choose. One option is two states for two people, side by side, etc. Palestine will be without a military organization. They will have police, etc. The support among Israelis and among Palestinians is between 60 to 65% of support, but the support in one state is between 5 to 7%. One state for the two people as a second alternative. The support is less than 10%. So again, it depends. By the way, if you look into the history, the change in the public support to diplomacy or to division of this land or to states came after a wave of violence. We signed the peace agreement with Egypt after the Yom Kippur War. We came to Madrid and then to Oslo after the first Intifada. We left Lebanon as a result of Shia terrorism and suicide bombers. And we left Gaza and we built the barrier or the wall as a result of the second Intifada. So it's sad, but frankly speaking, the idea that we understand power is acceptable by me because, unfortunately, people are afraid of change, and the life in Israel today is good. Our economy in macro parameters, is a great. We have a great economy, a great industry, high tech industry, science, education system. So even the way we face the corona is an example to all the world. So it's a great place to live. Why should we change? Why? Because they want a state of their own. This place was given to us. So, but during the first Intifada, during the second Intifada, and by the way, even during 5, 7 years, 6 years ago, during the minor Intifada that we have around Jerusalem, um, during 1 year, 6, 7 years ago, 67%, between 65 to 70% of the Israeli Jews, only Jews, um, were ready to give all the Arab neighborhoods in Jerusalem to everybody who will be ready to accept it because of the level of violence, because of fear. So it is sad because all what I'm trying to do or to convince people now that we don't have to suffer, we don't have to lose life in order to understand that finally we should choose another future.
So I want to wrap up, I think, because it's about 1 o'clock here and 11 o'clock your time. Um, Despite all the frustrations of the past 20 plus years as an activist, you're still quoting Herzl's famous message, Im tirzu ein so agada, if you will it, it is no dream. Um, and you use it in two senses. First, that people should participate and contribute to a piece. And second, that you should have hope. So what gives you hope today? And I hope
You
there
know,
is.
I'm a very optimistic person, not because I
Yeah.
can tell you that tomorrow we shall, I don't know, the Messiah will come or we shall have a great future. No, because I was trained, or okay, I was educated to believe that it is in our hands, and I saw it happening. You know, I was born in the Jordan Valley, and the Syrians was, bombing the kibbutz, and every time when our people and when our parents tried to work the land, and I see Israel today, and it is a great place, really, and I believe that today, much more than during the end of the 19th century, we can shape our future. We have the military power, we have the economic power, we have the scientific power, we have the industrial power, we have, and if we shall choose the right track, the right road, we shall have the support of the international community and of the Jewish world. So what else do we need in order to go forward? It is in our hands.
All right. And with that, I'd like to thank you again so much for giving us a thoughtful and challenging presentation and to wish you incredible luck for the rest of your book tours. I want to say to all of you that Friendly Fire is available for purchase from our official partner and local bookseller, Broman's Bookstore in Pasadena. And I don't know whether we have a link in the chat, probably not, but it's on the Jewish Book Festival webpage at the Jewish Federation. Ami has kindly autographed some book plates, I think, that will be included when you ask for it. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and for all your support. We are here because of you. I'd like to thank our hardworking committee members and the Jewish Federation staff, our team of advanced readers, our literary circle members, our community partners throughout the region, and the Jewish Book Council. We'd also like to thank our behind-the-scenes webinar wizard, Jake Tavel, who makes it look easy, and it isn't. Please be sure to join us again for our upcoming events. First, this Tuesday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. West Coast time, Mitchell James Kaplan will discuss his novel Rhapsody, which is based on the life of George Gershwin. Next Sunday morning, November 7th at 10 a.m., and don't forget to set your clocks back because it's going to be standard time. PJ Library Family Storytime event for young children will host Ethan Berlin, who's returning to read I Am Not a Dog Toy at the Southern California Children's Museum. That's in Pasadena. This is planned as a hybrid in-person and live stream event, so check the Jewish Book Festival webpage for details and any updates. Same Sunday in the afternoon at 4 for adults, so that's November 7th at 4. Dr. Leah Garrett from Hunter College in the Bronx will be presenting X-Troop, the Secret Jewish Commandos of World War II, and that's a virtual event on Zoom as part of the University of Laverne's annual Kristallnacht memorial event. For more information, to sign up for any of our upcoming events, please be sure to visit the Jewish Federation's Book Festival webpage, and we hope to see you there. Thank you all again so much. Have a good day. Shalom Lehitraot.